But then we've had Ben and his colleague then developing the prototype bamboo bat, which he'll talk about. The other aspect of this in a sustainability sense is actually the whole area of bat repair and refurbishment. And actually, there's quite a thriving industry that's really under the wire. For all of us that played, you'll have your favorite bat and you'll look after it. You'll tape it up. You'll even send it out to specialists to get repaired, to keep that, to extend the life of the bat, because you like the feel, you like the way it operates. So that whole area of bat repair and refurbishment is not as, it's really gone under the wire. And there's some quite really very professional operations now in that space. There's this company called Fantail in New Zealand, and they produce these tutorials showing you the repair of a bat and moving beyond repair to full refurbishment and resale. So this is an area that's not really being considered so much. So going to clothing, and I'm borrowing some of Yashi's excellent slides here. So clearly we've got the use of synthetics and polyesters, and in some instances we've got cottons, but I don't know the split, but I suspect in reality a lot of it is the synthetics. And really some excellent stats that Yashi just pulled up, just to show the impact of this. In a game of cricket, there are potentially at least 90 garments that are used in a game. And it may be more if people are wearing, short sleeve jumper, long sleeve jumper, hat, so you expand that out. In one game of cricket, there's 100+ items. And if you expand that out from village cricket right through, there's a lot of units being sold. So a lot of items being sold globally. But of course, if we think about sustainability, there's both the environmental and the social issues associated with the sector, particularly the manufacturing, where a lot of the manufacturing of the items is undertaken outside, for example, the UK, in Asia, South and East Asia in many instances. But we really don't know a lot about the conditions that are used to produce a lot of that equipment. So we don't know about, the working conditions. We don't know about the infrastructure, the practices, the use of, child labor, for example. And I had a call with an ex-international player this morning who had been visiting factories, and he was telling me, without going into details, in some of these factories, there isn't the best practice going on. So this is an area that's not really been considered so much. And we have, on an environmental side, we've got, different issues associated with the embedded carbon, associated with manufacturing, particularly the synthetic products, the inks and dyes, the potential, pollution areas associated with the chemicals, the finishing, again, we've all seen, particularly in the clothing sector, fashion and clothing sector, some of those images of rivers that are blue or red. And then we've got also the other issues that are becoming more important is actually in the laundering of the gear, the microfibers that are emerging, which is becoming a much bigger issue in terms of marine plastics and pollution there. And then we've got the huge waste in the clothing sector. But we are also seeing that haven't necessarily maybe come across to cricket yet, but in other clothing sectors, you're seeing people experimenting with bamboo fibers. And again, in the discussion this morning, one of the properties of bamboo fibers in clothing is its odor, I don't know what the right word, odor resistance. It doesn't smell. So particularly for cricket, this could be very good. As the guy said this morning, certainly the males have all been extremely smelly changing rooms. And I think particularly bamboo-based clothing may well be a really interesting thing for the women's cricket sector, and maybe a big opportunity there. So we've also got banana fibers that are being experimented, and pineapple fibers, and also other biomass fibers that are being used in other sectors, maybe not necessarily in cricket or other sports, but are being developed, and maybe Yashi can pick that up in the discussion. But also we've got second life fibers. Econile fiber is produced from fishing nets, and this is a second life fiber from nylon that is particularly being experimented with in football, even at the Bundesliga level. But again, I don't know if any Econile fibers have been used in cricket. We've also got, particularly for the specificity, if there's the right word, in cricket, there's a lot of leather is used in gloves, in boots, and even in some, probably in some pads still, leg guards. So again, we've seen a whole range of new developments there, in terms of vegan leathers that are not using animal hides. So particularly, again, from banana fibers, from pineapple fibers, but also now from cactus. They're not pure fibers at the moment. They use a polymer to bind this, but it's an area of quite significant development at the moment. So just in closing here, we've got some sort of pluses and minuses that we're seeing if we're thinking about sustainability, innovation, and cricket. We've got one of the first examples of it's not regulations, but it's at the level of broadcasting rights. Grace Nichols produced some gloves, some upcycled gloves using off-cut waste from manufacturing that Sam Billings played with, as I understood it, in an international, or certainly an England game. And then the match referee stopped the use of the gloves because of the number of colors in this, contravening some of their broadcasting regulations as such. So we've seen that sort of regulation crushing that innovation. So clearly it had passed the performance, it was greener in that sense, but it contributed, one might say, a perverse set of rules. We've also seen, and I literally just picked this up yesterday, bizarrely, from talking internally on something totally different with a professor of craft, at our university. And he highlighted to me this report just completed in the UK from the Heritage Crafts Association, and that basically is highlighted that there is no more production of hand-sewn cricket balls in the UK. That whole sector is gone. So all of those hand-sewn cricket balls are being produced outside the UK. It just doesn't exist anymore in the UK. So that's, again, something around some of those skills in the craft area that are just disappearing in this sector. Also, in terms of their risk classification for craft-based products, they classify cricket bats as, they use the term endangered, as an endangered species, in the sense that I think they specified there was only 11 to 20 indigenous UK bat manufacturers. So, again, these are quite interesting points, emerging. Shouldn't, I'm talking from the UK, but we've got looking at a global audience here, looking to support the sector in our different countries. But also in doing some of the research that we're looking at, I found this, I mentioned them earlier, the Fantails company in New Zealand. And if we look at their mission statement there, it's a millennial company, they're doing a good job, good business, clearly. And they clearly, want to move towards a zero carbon business and giving something more positive to the environment. And that's right up front there on their website. And they're also got this really, good business around, repair and refurbishment. So maybe it were a space of an interesting time for innovation. Here we've got the bamboo bat example. And that really has gone crazy in the media. And also we've got the 100 coming up in the UK, which really is now going to disrupt the sector. So I will shut up there and I will pass across to Ben, and hopefully Ben can open up his slides.
Yeah, can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so hi everyone. As I said earlier, if anyone joined late, I'm Benson Davies. I did a research project in my final year at university asking the question, can bamboo replace willow and cricket bats? And it's great to see so many cricket enthusiasts in the attendance here today. So let me just talk to you, if this moves on. Yeah, there we go. So a quick introduction. So I was working with my supervisor, Darshil, who Martin mentioned, and Darshil has represented Thailand under 19s. So not a huge cricket playing nation on the men's side, but their women have recently qualified for the World Cup, which is, you know, a massive achievement. And he's still in contact with a lot of the team. So it was something that we thought it was, you know, I played cricket throughout the years, I played at university. He's still massive into the game. So it was a project that we both thought we could really give something back and combine our interest in both materials and sport. So we focused really on the material testing because there's very little literature on this. So we had the chance to really add something new. So like you can see, the main question we're asking is, can bamboo replace willing cricket bats? But to answer this, we've got to look at what are the properties of laminated bamboo and how do they compare with willow? So yeah, so this was a mix of material innovation as well as personal development for both myself and Darshil. So for those not really used to the cricket world, I think most of us are, what are the key properties we're looking at? Well, density. So this is how heavy the bat is. Obviously, the lighter the bat is, the faster you can swing it, and that gives more energy to the ball. So that was the first thing we looked at. The second thing is the stiffness. And what you're looking for a cricket bat is you want it to have a stiff blade, or the willow part of the bat, with a flexible handle. So this is cane in the case of a traditional cricket bat. And this is really important because having a stiff bat will allow the energy from the player to transfer to the ball. It's similar to a golf club. So when you look at a player swinging the golf club, the handle is very flexible, but the head of the club is very rigid and stiff. So the third thing we looked at is the surface hardness. Like Martin mentioned, when Dennis Lilly walked out with an aluminium bat, the reason they banned it was they said, you know, the aluminium bat is going to damage the ball. So we've got to find a material that's hard enough not to damage itself if it hits the ball, but also not too hard so that it does damage the ball. Fourth thing is damping. So this is, if you hit the ball, what does it feel like? If you've got a bat that's got absolutely no damping, you know, I'm sure a lot of you have hit the toe of the bat, and you know, it's not a nice feeling. So we're looking for something that allows the player to get a feel for the ball without ruining their hands through big vibrations. And then finally, the last thing was the coefficient of restitution. So this is a measure of how bouncy the bat is. So if you bounce a ball on the bat, how high does it bounce? And as you can imagine, the sweet spot, or the purple area on the diagram, that's the bit of the highest coefficient of restitution. So that's the bounciest part and the bit that we're aiming for. So what did we find? And this is where it gets interesting. So the specific strength of a material is a measure of how strong it is divided by the density. So it's generic across all materials. So you can compare any material and its specific strength. And what we found is that the bamboo, although it's denser, the properties vastly outperform the willow. So it's both stronger under compression and bending, which is relevant when you're playing your shots. If you've got a weak bat under compression, the ball's not going to fly off the middle. It's just going to kind of plop in front of your feet. Whereas what we found is that the bat is over 4 times stiffer than a willow bat. So this means that if you hit the ball at the same place with a bamboo bat, you're expecting it to go 4 times further, which is obviously a great thing for a batsman, not so much for the bowlers. However, as I said before, the biggest issue we have is 40% denser. And to give you an indication, a normal bat is under 2 kilograms. The bat that we've made is 2.4. So it's a significantly heavier bat than is used to be being played with. However, even though it was just a prototype, it seemed to perform well, even with a significant weight increase. So finally, as I mentioned, the frequency and the damping properties. When we took it to the nets, we played with it a few club players, a few university players, and they said, you know what, we can't tell the difference between a willow bat and a bamboo bat. And that's been one of the biggest questions we've got, you know, that classic sound of leather and willow, are we going to lose that? So no, we went, okay, you can't tell the difference, let's see if science can. So we took it back to the lab, we tested out the bamboo and the willow, and we found, you know, within a few percent, these two materials had almost identical results. So this is great for us. It says, we've got the human aspect and the science saying they've come out with the same result. And it also means you're not going to lose that classic leather and willow. It's just going to be leather on bamboo. So what do we find from a performance? Really, the performance backed up what we found from a material perspective. So we took it to some clubs, we took it to some universities, namely Cambridge, where I was at. So a range of players all the way up from university level captains to club cricketers to a few junior players. And they've all said, yes, it's a lot heavier. But the biggest thing is that the sweet spot, so the middle of the bat, is larger, both wider and taller. And this is a big advantage if you're a cricketer, especially a batsman, because it means you've got a larger room for error when you're playing your shots. So the common theme we found was that it's difficult to get used to it, but when you hit it and got used to the feel of the bat, the ball really flew off the bat, which is obviously great news. So turning back to sustainability, why is that? Why is bamboo the material of the future? Well, most bats are manufactured in India and China. So willow is grown in the UK, it's shipped to India, and then it's shipped all the way back. If you're buying a local bat in your local shop, that's the process. So bamboo is grown in India and China, directly next to the factories. So already you're cutting out 50% of your transport emissions. We've got increased CO2 capture. The life cycle or the maturation of a bamboo is 5 years. To mature a willow tree, it takes 15 years. And because you've got this, the supply of willow is not developing as it should, trees are cut down early, which means up to 20% of all the culms which are turned into the bats are just made into cheap firewood, just because of natural defects. So the shorter maturation time means that more carbon dioxide is captured by the bamboo. As well as this, there are more potential areas for growth of the bamboo. For example, if you had a major factory, you could grow your bamboo right next to it, helping the CO2 of the site to decrease its carbon footprint. And finally, there's great opportunities for business development. So bamboo is grown in, a lot of it is Southeast Asia, which is less developed countries. So for us, we feel that this is an opportunity for less economically developed nations, or even nations which don't really have a common industry, to start growing bamboo to be used in their factories. This can be linked back to the manufacture of the bats, because you could have a country, for example, Thailand, which Darsha is very well connected to. They could grow their own bamboo, manufacture it in factories in Thailand, and then use it directly for the national teams. So countries which aren't as developed are going to have this opportunity to really have a different route into the sport if they can't afford the willow bats. But yes, the bamboo bat is not legal, and the MCC have released a statement, quite rightly, saying that after the law 5.3.2, the blade shall consist solely of wood, and bamboo is technically a grass. So all the advantages of the grass cells are also its biggest weakness, in that it's not currently allowed by the MCC. However, we feel it's an opportunity for innovation. Almost every other equipment has improved in material and design, so why not bats? Like Martin said, the recycled gloves of Sam Billings, that shows innovation. And although that was banned for commercial TV rights reasons, we see a bamboo cricket bat with way more benefits than drawbacks. You look at the introduction of DRS, that has its difficulties. And even today, some people are still against it. However, we feel it's such a big innovation, a big change, that it's a really important thing to consider. And finally, on the laws of cricket, well, why can't cricket be a world leader in climate change? We've now got Formula E, which started out over five years ago, which was not really picked up, and now it's one of the leading motorsports in the world. So we think this could be a great innovation and a great change for cricket as a sport. And finally, where do we see the future of cricket bats? So obviously we've just made a prototype, and I have it in my bedroom, and it sits near, and it's very heavy, so it's a great weight. But obviously, if you want to take it out onto the pitch, you need to optimize the design. So we want to work with manufacturers, we want to work with the MCC to really bring about this innovative material into the modern game. And whether we make it all the way to the professional game, or we just replace the millions of plastic bats that are used by kids cricket every day. This is a material that we see has a real future in cricket, and could really change the sport in the long term. So thank you for listening. And I'll hand you back to Martin.
Okay, well, brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Ben, and covering many aspects of it. So I'll just ask you a couple of questions, and before we sort of open it up. Where are you now with the bat? And because there's been tremendous media interest, and I'm just obsessed. So I listen to all these cricket podcasts. So there's it's at least 5 or 6 of the podcasts that picked it up, and particularly BBC World Service one, and Stumped one had quite a good analysis of things, including the guy from the MCC that highlighted that he didn't see the bamboo grass aspects as the issue. I think he was talking broadly and not necessarily specifically. He was saying more it's the lamination part. So I guess, are you already in conversations with any manufacturers? Because I noted you work with some guys in the East Anglia, Cambridge area originally. And where are you hoping to go with it? Have you had interest from companies in working with it?
So the original prototype was made by Garrett and Flack, who are they're a small manufacturing firm. They make a lot of high quality bats. So we were really lucky to work with them. And they produced a really quality bat for us. But no, you're right. The MCC says, it can't be laminated. It can't be wood. So the way the bamboo bat is made is the cull, or the bit you see growing out of the ground, is split along the length, and all these thin plies are glued together. So that's where it comes from, the laminate. But we feel that there's such a big opportunity for cricket to really improve its sustainability. Because I said it's 40% denser, the bats are going to have to be thinner. Because it's manufactured in such a precise way, the natural variation that you see in willow isn't there. So when you throw away 20% of willow blocks just because there are natural cracks and holes, we won't have that with bamboo. So we're using less material with less waste to produce a bat of the same quality. So really, I don't see any downsides in that. But yeah, we've started. There's been a lot of interest from manufacturers, which is really exciting to see. So we're currently going to start having conversations with them just to see where this could go and what they could also offer us. So it's a really exciting time. And the MCC, I think, in their statement and on the podcast, they've been really positive, saying, this is a great innovation. This is something new. This would be something we would love to work with. So it's been very positive, along with some kind of traditionalists saying you can't change 200 years of willow cricket bats.
No, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I was in a conversation with an ex-international player in South Africa this morning, and who's interested in distribution of equipment. And he said if you had one now, he would definitely have a market for it with the kids, in the kids market. And thinking about the issue of cost, that's another area. I think there's 2 issues. One we just said is trying to quantify that production waste benefit versus the willow is perhaps something that could be further gone into, because I think that's but I think the potential cost per item of it would be a major issue, because simply the price of a willow bat, I haven't bought a willow bat for a long time, so I almost fell off my chair when I saw 400, 500 quid. So I think if you're able to, look at the cost side of it as well, I mean, that to me starts to open up a lot of opportunities. So did you have any thoughts on that side?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's aside from the sustainability advantage, is that because we would be able to be growing the material right next to the factories, you're saving on emissions, but also the cost. If you're growing a tree in the UK compared to somewhere like India and China, the costs are so much lower in India. So this really opens up the sport to not necessarily individuals, but countries who aren't able to compete with the likes of England or Australia or South Africa, who have that funding. countries, up and coming nations, we've got interest from the Middle East, we've got interest from Thailand, these countries that they don't have the financial backing to compete with the big nations. But if you can say to a child on the street, you know what, instead of paying £35 for a willow bat, here's a £10-15 bamboo bat with the same performance, it's better for the environment and it saves you loads of money. So it's one of the biggest selling points that we think for the bamboo cricket bat.
And I think amongst the kids, if you can get extra ping, it's terms of making the entertainment, the fun aspect of this, I think that's, another element of this. So I think we'll open it up for questions now. Do we have any questions from the audience or indeed the panelists?
Hold on. Lee Burns has raised his hand, so let me unmute him.
That's well Chris is doing that, Ben. I think it's great what you're doing. I think the exposure around sustainability is great, but what I was really interested in was your player perception and your engineering scientific proven route. I think that's great that you're merging both. A lot of people and a lot of products in the market go down the scientific route or the player perception route, and you've done both, which is great, and I think that'll really put you in good stead in the future.
Yeah, cheers. I think it was
sorry.
So I was just going to reply to Neil saying I think it was really important for us to see that a lot of science it isn't replicated in the real world. So for us to say, look, we've got this scientific information that says it's going to work, and we've got the cricketers saying, you know what, it does work. It's really nice to see that those two come together.
Lee, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, thank you. Hi, Ben. I think the interesting point here for me is around women and children being able to use their bamboo bat. It sounds like obviously prototypes are heavy. Do you guys have kind of a game plan to get the weight down so that it could appeal to both of these kind of growing sectors of game?
Yeah, exactly. You make a really good point, and everyone who's used the bat from men to women have said it's too heavy, and we accept that. And we said, this is the first prototype. It's based off I think 2018 Garand and Flack bat, so we knew it was going to be heavy. And what we see the development going is towards the kids and the women's game, especially because we can bring the size down quite dramatically. And I think it's a really good developer for both sides of the sport, because cricket bat sizes are so conducive to all ages. We really see that there's a potential for, when we optimize the design through computer simulations and just expert analysis, we really think we can get a product which is available to men, women, children, to really the whole market and help develop the game.
And are you obviously MCC is the governing body for for some of the world, but not for the what about the flexibility of some of the other organizations on accepting bamboo?
Well, we're really open to working with everyone. I think for us, we're especially interested in promoting the game in Southeast Asia, where Darshil's from. So for us to be able to have conversations with any cricketing body, however flexible or inflexible, it's really just a chance for us to develop the sport and make it much more sustainable. So we're not ruling anyone out, we're not ruling anyone in, but we're just trying to kind of get the product to market in the best possible way.
Thank you.
I mean, just a quick observation. It does beg the question, and maybe I should know it, and maybe Chris does know it. Is the MCC is regulating at the level of the professional game? If a bat was explicitly developed only for the club or schools market in Brazil, for example, which is also a growing area, maybe it's where it's less tight regulations, in a sense, if you see what I mean. And do you know anything about that, Chris, from a law's point of view?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the same as it's obviously the laws of the game, and those apply right across the game, regardless of whether it's recreational or professional. I mean, at a recreational level, it's pretty difficult to police what people are coming out with, and you do occasionally see bats that you might be asking questions about. Yeah, so it'd be difficult to police at recreational level, but certainly, all leagues sign up, for example, to the laws of the game, and which clubs are then affiliated to. So at a professional level, obviously, they can prevent it. I've got a question, and then another attendee would like to ask a question. So the question is, it looked like the lamination was all longitudinal rather than cross lamination. Did you try both? And if so, what decided your selection?
So it's a really good question, and it's laminated in both directions, just because the pliers are 8mm by 10mm. So I've got the back here. I don't know if you're able to see it, but we laminate it in both directions to get this block of wood, which you can then work with. For us, we did some investigation into whether it's better to have it face on, which is the long side, or edge on, which is the short side. And we found really there's not a huge difference. So for us going forward, it's something that we're definitely going to look into and say, how else can we optimize the bat? How can it be made better? But at the end of the day, it might be a manufacturing decision rather than a scientific decision.
Okay, Neil Radford put his hand up. Sorry, I'm just going to let him in. It's obviously Neil's an ex-professional cricketer. And Neil, you there?
Mic off, on.
Yeah, can you hear me, guys? Is that all right?
Yeah, can hear you.
The question for you, Ben, is I know that you're obviously trying to get a bat established with the MCC. Are you thinking about doing stumps as well? Because there's a huge amount of timber being used in stumps. I don't think you should be focusing purely on the bat element, because without stumps, you don't have a game. So I think realistically, the MCC should be supporting the process. I understand their predicament, because this has been a long-term thing, cricket played over so many centuries. But innovation is critical to the next generation of people playing and going on. And if the bat stands up to a hard cricket ball, I'm sure it would stand up to a hard cricket ball as a stump. Yeah,
no, you're 100% right. It's something that we made the bat because that was the initial project, but we haven't ruled out anything. It's really astounded us how far across the world it's reached. We've had people reaching out from Canada saying, can you make ice hockey sticks out of bamboo, which we're not so much sure about. But no, 100%. There's so many different things you can innovate in the cricket game. The stumps and the bails being one of them. So there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to use bamboo for that. It's just not something we've looked into at the moment.
Just a quick note there is we had a very interesting meeting, myself, Chris and Niall, with companies that produce shinty sticks in Ireland, and they were really interested. So they faced the situation you did perhaps 2 or 3 years ago there with sticks, and Niall's the expert on this. If I get it wrong, correct me, Niall.
Hurley sticks.
Oh, sorry, Hurley sticks. Sorry, no, it's just that shows my ignorance about the two sports similar in my head. But Hurley sticks, and it was heavy initially, but they've shaved it down. But also, as Niall was intimating before, they've done a lot of technical analysis with Loughborough, a lot of user experience, and they've innovated now where the pros are really, as far as I understood, are now really endorsing the product as a better product. So there's maybe a little case study there you could draw on, and we could help facilitate that link if it was useful.
I think it's a really good point that Martin makes, is that a lot of the times when we're looking at sustainability, we're trying to get products to the level of being equal. But in these two instances, where it's Torpy and Angus and Sean at Torpy, and yourself, Ben, you're creating the coefficient of restitution and a performance that's actually sometimes above the existing bats or the existing equipment. And that's where there's the interesting discussion about elite sport. But in a position of all-inclusive sport, it's a great story. I think it's a really good story that you guys have.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest concerns actually, is that the bats we produce will be too good. So a lot of people have come on saying, I'm a bowler, I don't want to be hit for 6 sixes and over. We 100% agree with that, and will work, because the advantage of the material being better is that we can make it thinner. If your material is not as good, you can't make it better in any way. So I think it's a really good point of also making that distinction between making sure there's a contest between bat and ball. No one wants to see some of the England-India tests where it finished in 2 days. You don't want to see that. You want to see a good 5-day test, or going down right to the last ball of the World Cup. So that's something that we really can work with and work on to make sure that it's a fair contest.
Yeah, I'd actually like to chuck something in there just to finish on this. So working in the recreational game, and Neil will be able to also make some comment on this. So one of the problems is that obviously if the ball gets hit further, it becomes a health and safety issue, because if the balls continue flying out of the ground, it requires ball stop netting then to be put up, which in itself is has a number of not great carbon coefficients involved, because you're putting up poles, you're putting up plastic netting and all the rest of it. And it's a serious issue, because most cricket is played in England anyway, played on small grounds, that are either in urban settings or have housing estates near them. So producing something that can then hit the ball that much further is not going to be conducive to the kind of sustainability, if you like, of recreational cricket. It is an issue. It's a big issue, because I spent a lot of my time talking to planners, talking to small cricket clubs, and they were faced with extinction basically if they weren't able to mitigate the flying all over the place. So yeah, that trying to get that balance between bat and ball, I think, is probably going to be one of the big areas you need to work on. As you say, golf is an interesting example of where they over-engineered the equipment, which then removed the professional game miles from the amateur game, because the amateur game is suddenly they're starting to drive at 500 yards.
But maybe this is again another reason why the interesting potential focus on the kids market, because they're maybe less stronger. They won't perhaps face the thing of clipping off your legs and going to a housing state. Maybe they're less strong, and also maybe in the female market as well. So maybe that in certain markets you have to exclude, but there may be certain markets where the criteria comes together, and it's that sort of optimize. It's a big issue on the game overall, is that bat and ball issue. That how do you optimize it? Particularly, I think the window is the 100, because that's going to spin off all sorts of other innovations. And literally just talking, as we started this project, you've heard Mark Butcher, ex-England guy, questioning on one of the podcasts. We've had cricket's equipment and kit has been the same for 100 years. Why don't we innovate? The World Service stumped one. There was one of the Indian journalists there saying we need more innovation. The colleague from South Africa this morning, very much open to innovation. So, it's somewhere, for me, it's finding your niche, niche bit. Does that make any sense? I mean, Ben, what do you think?
No, exactly. You're 100% right. In the past few years, we've seen DRS, we've seen the IPL start up, similar to the American football franchises. We've got the 100, which is new competition, all trying to bring fans to the game. And I think it's helped by some of the, we had the World Cup. The ICC World Cup was an unbelievable event. I think there's so many opportunities to cricket showing, everyone thinks we're a bunch of old farts sit around for 5 days having tea. But you know what? We're not. We're with this innovative sport that've got ideas that are always up and coming. Okay, yes, not all of them are going to work, but there's always some innovation happening. And if it takes, an offshoot of the 100 to get a bamboo cricket bat on the stage, I'm more than happy to go along with that and get something going. There's been talks of having a all bamboo cricket match. and something like that, just to raise the profile, would be just really exciting to see where it could go, and who is also interested. I think it's a good point you make about the kids equipment, because we've got when you go to a school cricket game, there's hundreds of plastic bats lying around. Whereas if you've got a thin bamboo cricket bat, it's a lot more authentic, and it's got a much more authentic feel than the plastic and the plastic stumps. The other market that we've considered is training bats. You know, coaches will use a heavy bat to make sure people are playing straight, to make sure that they're got the footwork. You know, this is what it's designed for. It's heavier than a willow bat, so it's got the same size, it's just heavier. So we think we've got a few different options that we can definitely consider in the different markets.
The other just very quick thought, because I see there's another couple of things, was it's just, again, as one just gets into these things, one's brain gets working, it's that, of course, you may have used perhaps one species of bamboo, whereas there may be 20, and maybe the properties might be different. The diameter of the bamboo and the composition of the bamboo may be different in different regions, not just countries, but even different regions with different soil types, you know, water, etc. So did you sort of evaluate a couple of species of bamboo, or go to one where, you know, there was some sort of opportunity to use the wood? How to what extent did you look at the different bamboo options?
Yeah, so we chose Moso bamboo, and the simple reason being that the architecture department that I work with had a lot of it around. So it's something, you know, there are so many different ways we can innovate. There are so many different things that we could change to improve or unimprove the quality of the bat. So for us, this is really a starting point to say we've proved that it could work, and now it's just about making sure that it works in the best way for the sport, the players, the lawmakers, the umpires, you know, everyone in the game, to make sure that we have a fair and exciting game. And there's so many different options we could change. You know, the handle of the bat also hasn't been changed. That's also set in the laws. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if after our innovation with the blade, you know, in 20 years time, someone comes up with a new material that's similar to the cane handle. So really for us, it was a starting point where we can say, look, there's so many ways you can make the game more sustainable, and you can innovate and bring cricket to a lot of nations that are less developed. And it's more a proving ground, saying this is a concept that we've thought about, it works, and now it's all about making sure it's the right product.
Great, thanks. I just noticed the conversation's got so good. The time is absolutely ripped by. There is another question about cricket balls and leather and cork and around the sustainability of those. If you guys don't mind answering that offline, sorry, Lee, it's just we want to move on to the clothing side of it. So if you don't mind, if all of you can see the question, if you could give Lee your thoughts on that, that'd be really helpful. Okay, Martin, do you want to?
I mean, I think we're on the same wavelength here. I think we're not so constrained by the time. So if people want to stay on to just discuss, you know, I think we've got 10, 15 minutes, Chris. So again, you know, starting, as Chris is saying, to broaden the discussion a bit. If you know, people are welcome to, add further questions on the bamboo bat, because it's such a fascinating area. But if we have some other thoughts around the other types of equipment, maybe a vegan cricket ball, or I haven't I missed the specific question around. Is there a specific question around?
What about the composition of cricket balls, leather and cork, both sustainability issues?
I mean, if maybe Yashi, if maybe you could perhaps do a little bit of thinking about vegan leather and what you might think in terms of application to ball or boots, or even, you know, I don't know if they do it anymore. They used to, but you used to be able to get leather pads. So you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So leather, when we talk about leather industry, it is one of the most polluting industries. It'll take over, you know, what we're talking about, the cricket bats, our clothes in the industry, since it is one of the most polluting ones. It has huge impact on the environment and as well as on human health, both combined. We have seen multiple innovations in leather. One of the most promising ones that is coming up is the leather made from the pineapple leaves. So they have combined, something which was waste and which was just thrown away into something which is replicating exactly how leather looks, feels, and performs. But I haven't seen anything coming in particularly for the cricket ball. However, I have seen multiple, gloves made out of it. We have seen multiple shoes made out of it. So that could be one area to kind of start exploring into that. We have also, like Martin, what you mentioned, we have seen, leather coming from cactus, leather from mushrooms, leather from different type of fungus. So all that is again coming back to the innovation. We are still in the early phases of it, but so far pineapple leather has taken over. So I think it'll be good to explore that and maybe have that conversation with Peanutex.
Indeed, and I mean, in terms of, do you have any, from your side, experience the different types of fibers in terms of clothing? And I particularly, again, keep referring back to this very interesting conversation I had this morning, that bamboo fibers, and I think some of the coffee fibers that are also being developed and being applied to clothing have this deodorizing property. So not just a sort of structural property for clothing, but there are these other properties that are interesting. Do you have any thoughts about that in relation to cricket clothing?
Absolutely. So a bamboo, just like what we're talking about in cricket, bamboo is taking over in I would say more on a textile level, because we are seeing the use of bamboo fibers mostly in home textiles. So we see it in bed linen, we see it in table linen. It is slowly kind of coming into the apparel clothing as well, but not that far advanced. However, the bamboo fiber in itself, it has that inherited property, not only of removing the odors, but it is also antibacterial. So, it removes all those. So that's why we are seeing a lot of its usage in the Band-Aids and all those things. The other interesting fiber, one of the most interesting fibers, is tencel, which is also made in a similar way, like, it is coming from the plants and the process is similar, but it takes over and it has won multiple awards from the European Commission as well, because whatever water is used in the production of it, they are able to recover more than 99.99% of it. So tencel is huge, and we are already seeing it in apparel industry where multiple brands are using tencel now. So a combination of those, I definitely see it coming in cricket industry.
And what is the fiber again in the tencel? I can't remember. What's the actual fiber?
It could be coming from different plants, and it could be actually from a bamboo plant as well.
So it's the process. It's the process of what, because I think Levi's came across this sort of waterless process, because that's the production impacts of the different types of products is another issue. So did we have any more questions, Chris, from the?
Yeah, actually, a quick question for myself. Do the US and Canada have different regulations on importation of bamboo? I noticed a little bit about rain on and the type of bamboo that comes in, and the how would you put it, how they term. So is there different regulations?
Honestly, I don't know. I have never looked into that particular thing, but I can check it and come back to you on that.
There was something in the chat about, says, I recall an LCA. Somebody can interpret that for me. On Wimbledon tennis balls.
Yeah,
showing the materials have traveled 50,000 miles. How does cricket compare? I'm not sure I can answer that question.
Well, I mean, I sort of, there was a little implication in your presentation, Ben, that you had done done some sort of LCA? Did you do an LCA of the bamboo bat versus the willow bat?
We didn't look at it in depth. It was more from a high level of if you're manufacturing in India and shipping it to and from the UK, you're saving 50% of any transport emissions. But we haven't really looked into it to that much. Because
I mean, I guess the ultimate model, that it could be local production, local consumption in terms of usage, but also, also having a take back model, that the manufacturer also offered a service where they provided the bat under a service model that, at certain times if the bat got broken, you could take it back and be repaired as well. So, a sort of a real circular model would be really interesting, because I think, the issue that we have, if you use bamboo bats in the UK, you've got the embedded carbon. So, if but I'm still not quite sure, and this is just showing a lot of the issues, but I think you maybe touched on it, and you may know the answer on this, Ben, is even Gun and More, for example, that, produced low in the UK, still send certain parts of the bat or whatever to be assembled in India, and then it's sent back again. Did you look at some of those with some of the willow bats in terms of the sort of supply chains there?
So in terms of the supply chain, it's our experience with Garradon Flack, who said for them, it's a small sample size, but they import some of the highest grade willow, and 20% of their clefts are not adequate for cricket bats. So 20% already go for firewood, and that's a small manufacturing firm in East Anglia. We had a brief dive into the supply chain of a cricket bat, and yes, although the willow is grown here and a lot of it's kiln dried in the UK, a lot of the manufacture is done in India. So even if a small part is done in India, it's still got to travel all that way. Even if it's just a simple design, it's done that for a cost reason. But obviously from a sustainability perspective, it's significantly worse having to ship it both directions if it could be done in one location.
So Ben, let me ask you a quick question. For the bats, the bamboo bats, have you done the calculation for the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, the carbon emissions?
No, it's a very high level.
That would be your next step, because that will help you in selling it. So, it will, and then once you're able to calculate this, all 3 scopes, and then the scope 3 is the most it has 15 categories under it. Pick the ones which are the most relevant, and especially the transportation for this particular case would be important, and then compare it with the regular willow bats. And that would give you a very strong selling point, because whenever we're talking about climate change and, the entire conversation we are having, that we have an environmental impact, it kind of comes down to those carbon emissions. And when you have that conversation, convert those numbers into equivalencies. I always say it to everybody, because what happens is, if you say that, oh, this has such and such amount of, carbon emissions associated with, it is just a number. Nobody's able to kind of see that what exactly that number means. So relate it with something that, oh, this many amount of emissions equivalents to so many car miles driven, or so many trees cut down. And what you are trying to do with the bamboo bats, it's going to eliminate all that. It will add on huge to the entire story for you to sell, and for all these major leagues to kind of start accepting it, because
and just building on that, I think because you've got that trade-off. Yes, it's renewable, relatively fast-growing renewable material, the bamboo, relative to but then you've got, in the global market, you've got those embedded emissions. It becomes really interesting if you're developing the bamboo bats for the markets that are close to the source of production. So Thailand, really strong argument, growing really sustainable, in the sense that production miles will be much less significant than shipping it to the UK. Similarly for China. So that becomes a really interesting market closer to the source of the production of But I think, again, building on what Yashi is saying, to get into the, further down the line in terms of a commercial product, to actually use a simplified form of communication to communicate the product's sustainability benefits. That's a really key thing to just get it beyond it's made of bamboo, because there's other benefits you're talking about that people wouldn't necessarily think about. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Neil, I wanted to ask you about the performance testing. So this is not about bats, but helmets. It was one area Martin and I were looking at it, and obviously in terms of what they made from and all the rest. Yeah, because there's obviously a trade-off there against safety and what sort of materials could be used. Have you done anything in that area?
A lot of different testing on helmets and impact resistance, but I suppose essentially it's about the density of the material, particularly in between the outer casing and the skull. But I mean, this is done at high end. It's not done so much in our laboratory, more in medical research. There's many different organisations that take that on. But I think one of the big points for today for me is that, just turning it a little bit, is that the innovation beds need to be opened up and embrace the likes of technology that Ben and people are taking to the sports. There's so many different ideas out there, and sometimes they are squashed by bylaws or by the way things are written. And I think that is a really good example here of how a simple line in a document has raised more awareness than we could have ever had. I think that's a really good example of how exposure and the media really helps the case of sustainability here.
And I think the parallel processing with the upcycled gloves, where they actually almost taking it to the next level. They'd gone through clearly, through the performance testing with Grace Nichols, it had the protective quality, and really just to say it's two extra colors. You can't, I'm just being, being ridiculous there. But, in essence, that's what they're saying. It's perverse in many ways.
Great. Okay. Thanks. I think we're probably have to draw it to an end. But I like Neil's the statement there about one line generated all this, and it's going to generate a forum also on the 15th of July, where we're going to try and pull together all the stakeholders from cricket to kind of really talk about these issues, and hopefully you'll all be there to help us with that. But just to say thank you very much. Thank you for Martin to kind of getting this whole discussion going initially, and then to Ben for obviously coming and diving in and giving us a really good overview on production and the thinking and the design and the whole kind of concept of creation, which is great. Like you said, disrupting a sport. And to be fair to cricket, and I do want to be fair to cricket because I've worked in it for a lot of my life, cricket actually does always innovate, because the game, over the 300 years has changed immeasurably, and the 100 is just kind of the next iteration of things changing with the game. Getting now the right discussion around sustainable equipment and sportswear, that's going to be the real area of innovation we hope we can change. So thank you all, and hopefully we'll see you again on the 15th of July. If you've got any questions directly for the panelists that you do want to ask, please let us know, and I will make sure that they get forwarded to them. So thank you all. See you soon.